Okay. This is one of my favorite sichahs. First of all, it deals with a subject that's pretty relevant, taking interest, the prohibition against taking interest. And I don't want to use the words, the way to get around it, but the way to get around it. It's what the common means to, if you want to lend money and make a profit on it, you use what's called the heter iska. What is heter iska? You give a certain amount of money to somebody else. That person invests it. Now that investment is considered a twofold thing. Half is a loan, there's no interest on that. And half, you're the partner in the investment. You are an actual partner. It's as if you're in the company itself. So when it makes money, the half that's a loan is no interest. But the half that's an investment, you invested. If you invested, you're making money. So that's the halachic idea. Now, the avodah Hashem aspect of this is two parts. First of all, Kabbalah soul. A lot of people think Kabbalah soul, I got to do this. There's certain mitzvahs that you do because you like to do, you want to do. They're exciting and interesting, attractive. And certain mitzvahs which, well, God commanded it, I got to do it. But you kind of resign yourself to doing it without any active, energetic, involved commitment. You're just doing it. But over here goes, no. Kabbalah's O means you're investing yourself in God's activity. You're putting yourself into it. This is what it's not like, oh, I'm just doing what he said. I'm putting myself into this, not because I understand, because he wants me to. A totally different conception. In other words, there's mitzvahs which you do because you want to. Here, you're investing the same effort, perhaps even more effort. But not because you want to, because he wants to. That's Kabbalah soul. Second thing, so that's a very important concept which comes out in this sichah. The second thing is, I don't know, like for the last 2 or 3 years, particularly in our community in Boca, there's been a whole argument. How much is God involved in our actions? They start with the whole God needs you. The point is, it's not really God needs. That's such a silly, way of dealing with it. The real idea is what I'm doing affecting God or not? In other words, some of us have kids, even grandkids. So you ask your grandkid, or your young child, can you help me carry this? Do you need the kid's help? No. But you want him to learn to help. So you ask him to help. Now, there are some people who say, well, that's what God is doing by giving us mitzvahs. He doesn't need our mitzvahs. But he wants us to serve him for whatever reasons he wants us, for our own good, to perfect the world, for various different reasons. It means, so he's not concerned with our mitzvahs. He's concerned with the fact that we do those mitzvahs. See, this is very much against that approach. We see this here in the sichah. Just like we said Kabbalah soul is not just accepting what God commanded us, but putting ourselves into it. God doesn't only command us, he puts himself in, he involves himself with our observance of mitzvahs. That's this heter iska that we spoke about before. You invest, just like a person invests money and then he becomes an active partner, even though he's not actually doing that much, but he's an active partner, he's with it. So the same thing, God does mitzvahs, he commands it to us, that's the investment of the money at the outset. And then he's with us, as it says, Kol Hashonah halachos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Korah B'Shonah Kenegdo, whoever studies Torah law, God studies and learns together with him. That God is actively involved whenever we do a mitzvah, whenever we do Torah. He is putting himself in simultaneously. He's not just the absentee commander who, it's so nice that you did this. He's together with us. Whatever we do is affecting him. But that's a very important concept in this. It goes much deeper than God needs. Forget about he needs it, doesn't he? He is involved. He's with us at all times. That's from the core of the idea. Yeah, let's see it inside. This week's Torah reading includes the prohibition against giving or taking interest. Rashi concludes, I am God, your Lord, who took you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Sifra comments, from this verse, the sages derive the principle, whoever accepts the yoke of prohibition against charging interest, accepts the yoke of heaven. And with after the prohibition, the mitzvah says, I am God who took you out of Egypt. So if you cast off the prohibition against you, accept it, you cast off, you're casting off, I am God your Lord. You're taking yourself away from him, and who took you out of Egypt. You're denying, you're acknowledging or denying the Exodus. So the Rebbe asks a very nice question. Why this prohibition? There's plenty of other prohibitions in the Torah. Why do we say that this prohibition specifically is one which involves the acceptance of God, involves the acknowledgement or the denial of the exodus in Egypt? So the Rebbe gives Rashi's answer. Rashi says at the time of Exodus, God differentiated between the firstborn and others. So too is able to identify and hold accountable a Jew who lends money to his fellow Jew with interest and claims the money belongs to a non-Jew. So Rashi gives a very simple answer. Why do I say that God, it's this mitzvah which is connected to the denial of the Exodus and acceptance of the Exodus? Because look, when the Jews will be redeemed from Egypt, God said, I'm going to kill all the firstborn. And he was able to differentiate between the firstborn and another child, the child that wasn't the firstborn. And so too, if you try to say, this isn't really my money, it's a non-Jew's money, that's why I'm not charging the interest. The interest is going to him. God says, I know what's happening. So, by trying that kind of trick, you're denying the Exodus. It's Rashi's simple answer. Can't criticize Rashi, but it's obviously just one level of answer. And the Rebbe goes further. In this insight, however, it's only one aspect of interest, and the interest is what claiming the money belongs to a non-Jew. There's plenty of other types of interest. Even in that case, it does not apply when it makes a statement to mislead a human. It does not apply when the statement makes a statement to mislead a human being. The borrower knew that the money belonged to the Jew, he would not accept the money. The court would not allow the money to be accepted. It is only when it states that the money belongs to the Jew. Thinking that God will not make a distinction. He recognizes the money belongs to him. As such, he denies the Exodus, at which time God made a similar decision. However, this does not explain the connection between prohibition and interest as a whole in the Exodus. Furthermore, the connection between prohibition and interest in Kabbalah's whole requires further explanation. There are commentaries, another interpretation, that by lending money to a fellow Jew without interest and seeking to make a profit, the Jew demonstrates his trust in God and the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. He willingly fulfills the command to help a Jew without profiting. By contrast, if a person lends money in interest, he does not place his trust in God and casts off the yoke of heaven. In other words, here you have a choice. If you lend money at interest, you're showing your trust in God that, look, I know I can make money this way, but this is forbidden. If I really trust in God, I don't have to break the commandments to make money. He'll find a way to give me money in a way that I'm keeping the commandments. Why not? I mean, the whole world is his. He manages every moment of it. Even a leaf turn, the Baal Shem Tov will teach, even a leaf turning in the wind turns because there's a specific divine providence guiding it. So why do you have to make a buck this way? Make a buck another way. So, thank God, all of us have found ways to make a dollar. And Baruch Hashem, I say most of the time we do it kosher. We did. So why lend money? Speak about lending money and interest. That's one thing. Also, you're speaking about trust in God. It's a little. That's the main point. To trust God. That's really not really the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. That's bitachon. There's two different things. Kabbalah soul is one thing. Bitachon is another thing. They're both important, but the Gemara said that whoever keeps the mitzvah of interest denies. Excuse me. Whoever keeps the mitzvah of interest denies Kabbalah soul. What's it got to do with bitachon? Furthermore, the trust or lack of trust, not the question of interest, but without the mitzvah performing deeds of kindness, giving the loan with or without interest, that's really like, I'm going to give you a loan. So before prohibition against taking interest, Torah states, when your brother will come impoverished, you should support him. This implies it's without getting a profit. When a person concerned about his own livelihood refused to give interest to loan because he desires a business or in money with every penny of his resources, he demonstrates a lack of trust in God. He has not, however, violated the prohibition against interest, since in that instance, he did not offer the poor person a loan. In other words, he didn't give him a loan interest-free. They didn't charge him interest, he just didn't give him the loan. So the Rebbe has got to now explain to us much deeper what is this idea, what is the connection with interest in Kabbalah soul, and how does that affect us? Take the next little job.
Twofold dynamic, earning one's keep. This establishes a fundamental principle. Accepting God's yoke as expressed by the observance of the mitzvahs implies more than submission to God's will. It involves a proactive willingness to participate in His service, and that calls forth a similar response from above. God takes an active role in a Jew's divine service. This is expressed by the well-known interpretation of the blessing recited before fulfilling the mitzvah, praising God who sanctified us with His commandments, i.e., the mitzvahs we observe are His mitzvahs. He also fulfills them.
In other words, here is the fundamental point we're speaking here. When you do a mitzvah because Kabbalah soul, you're not just saying, okay, God, you commanded, I'm doing it. You're saying, God, you commanded it, I'm involved. I want to do what you asked me to do, and I'm going to put myself into it. And God says, oh, you're putting yourself into those mitzvahs? I'm going to put myself into it also. It's an active relationship Yes, it goes through the mitzvah, but it's really man and God working together. That's the fundamental point here. Okay. Now, anybody who's done the bar mitzvah mimer, he taught his kids the mimer will get this idea. Then take the next one.
There are two dimensions to this dynamic. God fulfills the mitzvahs before the Jewish people, as reflected in our sage's statement. What he does, he commands Israel to do.
Now, there in the mimer it says, there's a king who gives commands, but he doesn't do them. Then there's a king who, what he does, he commands others to do. As God himself does these mitzvahs, and by God doing those mitzvahs, that establishes the inner spiritual truth of the mitzvah, allowing us to do the mitzvahs. That's one thing.
He observes the mitzvahs in response to the observance of the mitzvahs by the Jewish people, as reflected in our sage's statement. Whenever a person studies the Torah, the Holy One, blessed be He, studies opposite him. This applies not only regarding Torah study, but also to the observance of other mitzvahs.
In other words, so we have two things. A, God does the mitzvah before us, and that is the commandment, his mitzvah, and then when we respond and, again, invest our energy, our effort in doing that mitzvah, he responds and invests himself in that very same mitzvah. So that's the twofold dynamic here. Now, Rebbe clarifies the point here.
Of course, the fact that our deeds prompt God to fulfill the mitzvahs is no indication that we are independently capable of causing God to act, because there's no comparison between our fulfillment of the mitzvahs and his. After all, a created being is utterly uncomparable to the Creator. Rather, this process of causation is possible only because God desired that our deeds influence him, so to speak.
In other words, why do people have such a big complaint against God? God needs, because that would imply that we as mortal human beings can affect God. God's needy. Need is a lack. If God needs us, if we are giving something to God, or we're doing something that makes God do something, he's not really very much of a God. So how can we just, we just said before, when we put on tefillin, we cause God to put on tefillin. When we study Torah, we cause God to study Torah. Wait a second. We human beings can affect God. So the Rebbe says, yeah, we can. Not because we have the independent power to do so. It's not because of anything we are. But he asked us to. He says, if you do it, I'm in there. So he commits himself. He starts the dynamic, and then it's spiritual cause and effect. The cause and effect is not because, there's a human cause and effect. You do something, it's this cause, this effect. Here, the cause, we're doing mitzvahs, we're studying Torah, has no power to bring about the effect that God studied Torah. We're human beings. He's an infinite God. What does an infinite God do with a human being? But he himself says, I want this. I'm doing this, I'm in. All you have to do is, now I'm in, you do the mitzvah. That, because it started from his perspective, therefore, every time we do a mitzvah, it affects him. He puts himself in. Now, it's not because we have any power over him, chas v'sholom. That he wouldn't be very much of a God then. But because he wants it to happen that way, it does.
This requires explanation. Why indeed does God want the divine service of mere mortals to exert influence in the spiritual realms, despite there being no comparison between them and him? The first phase of the dynamic that his observance of the mitzvahs precedes and brings about our observance can be understood. His deeds generate the potential for us to fulfill the mitzvahs. But what is the explanation for the second phase that our observance prompts him, his?
In other words, that, like I said before, I tell my grandkid, help me carry the box. And I'm carrying it and he's carrying it. So I've got, in order to motivate him, I've got to carry it. Understood. God does the mitzvahs before we do. But what God does actually responds to our mitzvahs, that still requires explanation. So you take the next little bit.
True kindness. To understand the above, it is necessary to clarify the concept of divine service as a whole. On the surface, why is the Jew's divine service necessary at all? Why not let God provide us with everything through an arousal from above as a reflection of his beneficence?
Okay, it's all good. It's a beautiful world. We live in the Garden of Eden. Everything grows by itself. You don't do anything. In fact, even the Garden of Eden, it says God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden into avodah sharma, to till it and to guard it. Even their work was required. How much more so when you get out of the Garden of Eden? There's this idea about an idyllic existence where you're a little baby and everything's given to you. It's not Judaism's ideal. Quite the contrary. Judaism wants you to work, to be active. Take it further.
In particular, there are grounds for this supposition because, as is well known, the world was created as a result of the divine initiative to act benevolently to his created beings. Since God is the ultimate good and is the nature of the benevolent to act kindly, why shouldn't he grant his creations everything they need?
There's a good argument to give. Of course, he's nice, so just let him give. Let him give and give and give.
In response, Hasidus explained that the ultimate expression of kindness is to have the recipient earn the good which you receive. A gift dispensed gratis without the recipient having earned it is regarded as bread of shame. Since it is the nature of the benevolent to act kindly, God desires to give the Jew the ultimate good. Therefore, he structured the world in such a manner that they earn divine beneficence specifically through their service.
It's in this present generation that's a little bit hard to understand. We're really used to just getting everything that, it's all good. We kids are just, spoiled is not the word. Instant gratification without any effort, it's taken for granted today. And that's, with previous generations, people won't, when I grew up, you earned, you worked. Yeah. It was something implicit in the satisfaction. And that's really part of the dynamic of this world. That we don't feel good just getting something for nothing all the time. Yeah, everybody loves a present from here and there. Now, you open your mailbox and you find a check for $1,000, you'd be very happy. But not on a constant basis. You feel something's lacking. I want to earn it. I want it to be mine.
On this basis, you can appreciate why the Jew's divine service impacts the spiritual realms above. Were a person to receive payment, beneficence, and the annual act for work, which, although it required effort, did not benefit his employer, the payment would be tainted. It would still be considered bread of shame. When the recipient knows that the work for which he's being paid is of no consequence, he feels that he does not deserve any reward, he's not truly earned it.
Just take it a step further. Not only does God give just, for nothing. Well, let's say here, you got to perform work, but you realize that work really doesn't mean anything. You're performing the work because he wants to show obedience, but not because it does something. Would you feel good? Even that, I earned it. He told me to do this, and I did it. So therefore, I earned my keep. He didn't just give me a free gift, but kind of hollow, more than kind of hollow, very hollow. So I didn't really do anything. I haven't earned this. Yeah, okay, so I did something to fulfill the requirement of having to do something, but it didn't. It's not that I made this. You want your actions to have consequence. That what I do has meaning and relevance because I worked and I produced something and it's real.
In Mitzrayim, so they didn't let us build the pyramids,
Yeah.
right? Because we couldn't like point to it and be like, we built the pyramids at least out of our, we did nothing more because it's even more.
Yeah.
For this reason, God structured existence in such a way that the divine service of the Jewish people has an effect in the spiritual realm, bringing about a spiritual equivalent to the mitzvahs performed on earth. Consequently, the reward Jews receive is not at all a bread of shame, but payment received for doing something of value to God, recompense well earned for their service.
So now, when we do, every time we put on tefillin, every time we study Torah, every time we do any other mitzvah that has an effect above, that's the reward. The benefit I get from the mitzvah is spiraling down from the spiritual effect of what I brought about. Schar ba'onish, reward and punishment, is spiritual cause and effect. Okay, the dynamics of it, sometimes you don't see it directly. I've done good, I don't see immediately the results of it. That's a whole argument, but the fundamental concept that what a person does, the mitzvahs he fulfills, generate good above, and therefore generate good below, is spiritual cause and effect. And so what he's saying is, we can feel good, we feel comfortable about that.
Isn't the fact that we don't have obvious Starbucks gullets, like that's like?
Excuse me?
Isn't the fact that what Vahayim Shemoah isn't like obviously what happens to us because of gullets? Like it's,
Yeah, it's true that in goals, you don't see the obvious reward of what you did, and you don't see, and now that you can have, you can be doing bad and still getting good. All that's true, but still, there is cause and effect. There is schar ba'onish even in goals. It's just less obvious. No, let's put it this way. I don't like to get into these discussions because people get, but I didn't see it. This bad things happen to good people. Yes, and they always did.
It's hearsay.
What?
It's hearsay. There's no way of proving one way or another.
Yeah. And it's more an argument, but the fundamental principle that, hey, what we do has an effect spiritually. And therefore, that spiritual effect ultimately flows down to this world. Yeah, that's core Torah. Okay. Take the next little bit.
Yep. When there is no grain to cut, there is another dimension to this concept. When a task is not productive, a worker will not derive any satisfaction from his labor, even if he is amply rewarded. He will work, but without energy or pleasure. Fulfilling the task will become very difficult and tiring. My revered father-in-law, the Rebbe Rayatz, illustrated this concept with an allegory. A landowner once asked a peasant to work for him. The peasant would harvest grain like he would do when working, but instead of swinging this cycle in the field, he would swing it in the landlord's drawing room. The landowner promised to pay generously for his work. At first, the peasant eagerly agreed, but he soon regretted it, begging to be relieved, explaining that he had nothing to show for his work. I do not see what I have done.
What is the story? Guys working in the field, hard labor. Linda says, you know what? Come do that in my drawing room. And you come in my living room, I'll be sitting at my desk doing my work, and you do your work. Swing your sickle as if you're actually harvesting grain. See, it's nicer, easier. In the end, he's not happy. Why isn't he happy? He's getting paid the same amount. Work isn't as hard. Because you don't see what you did. You want to be able to see your results. I know that. I have this in my work all the time. Sometimes the books don't get published immediately. Really, it's like we're waiting right now. Finally, the book got the donor wanted the cover this way, and then he wanted the cover that way, and like the book was finished around Rosh Hashanah time, all finished, and it still hasn't come out yet. And I could feel it, and I feel kind of like, yeah, I got paid, but I want to see my work. And every person has that sense of satisfaction. No matter what your work is, you want to see results. So that's the. If you don't do that, like I said, you're not going to put any energy into it, and you just I don't want to do this.
Like in today's day and age, you have people like sit in the gym all day and they do kind of swing stuff back and forth.
But they see the results.
How does that work? How does that work?
They have to see the results, otherwise they would give up. If you wouldn't see, the results of the work.
That's why you have all these tests, and your blood pressure went down. You can now pick up another weight. It's not.
Sometimes they hit a terminal point. Like they can't get stronger. They just keep maintaining, but they work for hours every day. How does that fit into this?
I don't think so. If they didn't see some sort of progress, some sort of growth, I don't think they just want to do it.
That's why they have mirrors everywhere.
Well, it's also the high.
That's why they have mirrors there.
Maybe every company I was talking
Just corporate America. It's just this, right?
Exactly.
Just useless jobs that you get paid this out for.
Right, but when the company doesn't make more money, the stock goes down, saying that you're stagnant. There always has to be growth, or else.
Yeah, but people in the gym, they don't necessarily go every day because they need to swing those hammers, whatever they're doing.
Yeah, but they want to swing a heavier hammer tomorrow, whatever.
Not necessarily.
I don't know.
They get positive feedback loop even without seeing the results. They feel the adrenaline, the exercise itself.
Something to.
Okay. Anyway, I'll call him to take it further.
Similarly, Hashem structured existence in a manner such as that a Jew's service would have a spiritual impact above. When a Jew sees that his divine service is productive, that it evokes a similar response in the spiritual realms. This knowledge infuses his efforts with energy and satisfaction, giving him the power to overcome the challenges posed by the evil inclination. He is inspired knowing that his divine service affects the very essence of Hashem, as it were. This knowledge empowers him to disregard whatever trials his evil inclination presents.
So in other words, the very fact that I know that what I'm doing is affecting Hashem, that Hashem learns Torah. When I learn Torah, Hashem is learning Torah. If I have that in mind, would I let a moment pass that I wasn't learning Torah? If I was aware, this is, Rabbi Goldberg is very into the word mindfulness. And it's an important idea. If you're mindful, if you're aware, if you're conscious that what you're doing, every mitzvah that you do, has an effect above, causing God to do that same mitzvah, it would be a whole different process. Why don't we apply ourselves so energetically? Because we don't realize what's happening. We don't have a sense of the effect of our mitzvah. If we knew that every mitzvah that I'm doing affects Hashem, no question would be different. Want to take the next one, Joe?
Taking Hashem as a partner.
All divine influence felt in this world depends on divine service of the Jewish people. Every mitzvah draws down a particular dimension of godly life. Hashem's fulfillment of a particular mitzvah in the spiritual realms is dependent on the fulfillment of that mitzvah by the Jewish people. Same is true in a more general sense. The very fact that divine service of the Jewish people has an effect in the spiritual realms is also achieved through their divine service. The divine service that accomplishes this is the observance of the mitzvah of prohibiting interest.
In other words, the Rebbe is now taking a general concept, bring us back to the idea of interest and this heter iska concept that I mentioned at the beginning.
What is interest?
Let me finish here. In other words, first thing is whatever we do affects him. Secondly, the very fact that dynamic, that whatever we do affects him, is also, God says, I put that into your hands. How did God put it into our hands? Through the mitzvah of interest or not taking interest. Involved, do you do it as an iska arrangement or not? That's what explains it here.
What is interest? Receiving profit for lending money, i.e. the lender derives a gain because the money lent once belonged to him. True, presently the money is no longer his, it has not been transferred to the domain of the borrower. Nevertheless, by having lent the borrower what previously belonged to him, the lender enabled the borrower to do business in the lender's mind. That is reason enough for the borrower to pay him interest.
Well, why do you pay interest? Hey, look, I gave you money. That money enabled you to do things. Oh, wait a second, the money is no longer yours. You gave it to, the idea of, this concept, it's brought down in the footnotes here. No, when you give a loan, it's no longer yours. The money doesn't belong to you. Yeah, he owes you a debt, but the money is not yours, it's now the borrower's. If it's lost, the borrower, isn't you didn't lose anything, the borrower lost. The borrower still has to pay you back. So if it's not yours, why should you charge interest on it? It's not yours. That's exactly the trick here. That's the point that I wants to bring out.
Thus, observing the prohibition against interest means taking profit only from money that is presently still with the lenders. This is also dynamic and underlying the heter iska, a financial arrangement where a certain portion of the loan is considered an investment, allowing the lender or investor the opportunity to receive a guaranteed return on his money. In the heter iska, a certain portion of the money that changes hands remains the lender's, it is merely entrusted to the borrower. Thus, when the borrower does business with the funds, he is also doing business with a share belonging to the lender, and the profit the lender receives is thus earned solely from the money that actually still belongs to him. Thus, the arrangement resembles a partnership. A lender-investor is considered an active participant, and similar principles apply with regard to the renting of animals or utensils.
I said at the outset, since other people walked in the middle. Heter iska means like this. One person lends another person money, but it's not a loan entirely. It's half of it is a loan, and half of it is, it's called the pikodon, entrusted object. So if you take it's my money, it's the lender's money still. So if you do business with the lender's money and that money makes a profit, who deserves that profit? Lender, yes. The half that's a loan, you deserve all the money from that half. But the half that's the lender's, well, you deserve some part of it because you're doing the work. But it's the lender's money, so he deserves a share also. That's the idea of heter iska. So the lender is now an active partner in the business. He may not be doing something that's seen actively, but he's still a partner. Now, take it further. You'll see how it's reflected above.
A Jew's conduct toward a fellow Jew is mirrored in how God conducts himself towards him. If the Jew transgresses the prohibition against interest, i.e., if presently makes a profit only because he lent his fellow Jew money previously, a similar pattern is followed by God in relation to him. There is no present and active participation from above in his divine service. He is only provided with initial resources, i.e. the mitzvahs are fulfilled in the spiritual realms before he begins his divine service, endowing him with power to carry out the service, but he is given no more than that. Second dimension mentioned previously, that God sits and studies opposite him, divine energy elicited through man's observance is lacking.
What do we say? We say mitzvahs were? God does the mitzvah beforehand. They're his mitzvahs. And that gives us the power, the energy to do the mitzvah. And secondly, that when we do the mitzvah, he invests himself and he does the mitzvah together with us. Now, if you lend money at interest, you're saying, I'm giving you the potential, and that's all. I gave you the potential, and now you owe me something for that. That would be like God just telling you to do the mitzvahs, but not actively involving himself with it in it. By contrast,
when a person observes the prohibition against interest, Hashem mirrors his actions, investing himself in man's efforts and partnering with him. Not only does he endow the person with potential before he begins his divine service, but Hashem remains an active partner in his present spiritual endeavors. The Holy One, blessed be He, studies opposite him. In this manner, Jew's divine service has an effect above, eliciting God's investment in his efforts.
in other words, when a Jew, as she says, I'm not going to take interest per se, involved in het iska, keeping them that. So God is, I'm also involved here. I gave you the potential at the beginning, and I'm still with you now. On this basis,
we can appreciate the connection between the prohibition against interest, the acceptance of the Oath of Hashem, and the exodus from Egypt. The prohibition against interest is of all-embracing significance. Its observance calls for Hashem's active partnership in one's divine service, a response to his proactive acceptance of Hashem's yoke expressed through the fulfillment of mitzvahs. And by establishing such a connection with Hashem, a person is granted divine influence that enables him to transcend all limitations, the spiritual counterpart of the Exodus.
and so we now see the thing. First of all, a person keeps interest. What does that do? He keeps the mitzvah against taking interest. So, God, he takes God as an active partner. Step one. And he does it actively. It's not just a passive thing. I'm going to keep this mitzvah. No, he's willingly put himself into it. And puts God into the mitzvah. And then, when God is involved in the mitzvah, it's not just a human act. It's something infinite. Every mitzvah that we do is not just, I strap put on these black straps, wearing these woolen threads. No, this is Hashem. I'm drawing down infinite godly energy into this world. Every mitzvah that we do has an infinite power. That's stepping out of Egypt. So that's the idea here. That keeping the mitzvah, the prohibition against interest, is Kabbalah's all, because it's this active involvement meant with God, that's what Kabbalah's all is about, an active involvement. And D, it takes you out of Egypt. It brings down God's infinity into this world. Okay, now, whatever goes the last thing about, not only is this a dynamic involved with God, it's a dynamic involved with the Rebbeim itself. Take it further.
The righteous resemble their Creator. As explained, God does not remain content with providing Jews with the energy needed to observe the Torah and its mitzvahs at the outset, but remains an active partner at the time they observe the mitzvahs, fulfilling the same mitzvahs that they observe. This pattern is also, as it were, displayed by the righteous, and in particular by the Messiah of the Jewish people.
And it's the Rebbeim.
Who connect the nation to God. Not only do they empower their emissaries to carry out the missions with which they are charged, but they engage in the same tasks themselves. This approach was especially apparent in the case by my Reverend father-in-law, the Rebbe Rayatz. Not only did he send out emissaries and empower them to strengthen the Jewish observance in general, and to spread the welcomes of Chassidus in particular, but he remained an active partner, dedicating himself to this work. He did so continuously not only in his early years, but also in his later years when he had disciples and disciples of disciples who were equipped to carry out these tasks. He still preserved, devoting himself to these very tasks.
When the Rebbe would give a mitzvah, he was involved himself. The Rebbe, sometimes actually involved. Yeah, well, like when giving tzedakah, he'd always give out dollars to encourage people to give tzedakah, and many other things. Things like so many people, he would tell, check your mezuzahs, put on check your tefillin. All the mitzvahs he was telling other people to do, he was personally involved with himself. Obviously, he wasn't standing on the street, mitzvah tefillin with mitzvah time, but this idea of putting yourself into the thing, taking an active involvement, that was there. And so this
serves as a lesson to all those who are bound to him and who follow in his footsteps. They should not remain satisfied with the fact that they have raised students who are involved with spreading Torah and Chassidus. They should not excuse themselves by calculating that since the work being carried out by their students is a result of their influence, they are consequently entitled to the additional light and spiritual benefits generated by their students' efforts. With such an attitude, they might feel that they need not continue to involve themselves with others, and that they can instead spend their time only studying Torah for themselves.
I remember Rabbi Yoel he passed away in his 90s. He was going out. They drive him to Borough Park, to Williamsburg, to Lakewood, to Muncie, saying shiurim. In his 90s, and he was happy to do it. He could have said, "Listen, I got plenty of students now who can do it." No. He had the chance to do it, he did it. That's the idea, but not just relying on your past, coasting on your past energies, but continuing, by yourself, continue to produce.
So this serves as a lesson to all those who are bound to him and who follow in his footsteps. They should not remain satisfied with the fact that they have many students who are involved with spreading Torah and Chassidus. They should not excuse themselves by calculating that since the work being carried out by their students is a result of their influence, they are consequently entitled to the additional light and spiritual benefits generated by their students' efforts. With such an attitude, they might feel that they need not continue to involve themselves with others, and that they can instead spend their time only studying Torah for themselves. Receiving profit additional spiritual light for one's previous efforts bears a resemblance to taking interest. Instead, a person must be ready not only to work on himself, but also to continue to involve himself with others. He must himself undertake the labor which he demands from his students. The reward which we will receive from foregoing such a spiritual interest will be that the Rebbe Rayatz will continue to participate in our efforts, and through him, for he stands between God and yourselves, is drawn down God's active participation. The result of our proactive acceptance of the yoke of heaven, this in turn will lead to our personal exit from Egypt, for example, being set free from all the limitations which we face.
He takes it a step further, bringing it down to the practical level. We learn the shiur today. Tomorrow, teach it to somebody else. Seriously, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Oh, I've gotten benefit from this idea. Spread it further. Take it a step further. That's, in other words, not just, oh wow, it was such a good shiur. We learned something. It's such a beautiful idea. No, don't ride on the benefits of what was previously done. Take that further. Don't just, this is one thing. Continue investing. And then what's the fruit of that? Will be infinite profit, investment from the Rebbeim, investment from Hashem, and everything that we do.